Fáilte vor go Instagram TV Gaelic Galore. Welcome to Gaelic Galore Instagram TV. Agus inju. Today we are going to look at the verb be and how you're supposed to spell it depending on the context that it's in. So start with the verb be is pretty much the central verb in almost every sentence in Gaelic. Frankly, everything that you're thinking about, ha and chanel, va and charo, be agus chavi, all come agus stem. They all stem from that verb in itself. So lots and lots of sentences depend on it. And the one thing that seems to cause a lot of people is that there's the word be appears in Gaelic in lots of different sentences, but the spelling seems to change. Now, some of that is down to pronunciation, subtle changes in pronunciation, but what you see a lot of time is people really using the wrong version of it, and they're all like, oh, but Ewan, I don't know what's the correct one. It's all hamiconi, come back confused, but actually it's quite simple. There's some very basic rules. Now, let's do a quick understanding of verb be. So be is here, and in Gaelic we use the root, the basic form of the verb, to give an order, and you'll hear that in things like be savach, okay, be mogal, be feicaloch, which is a very important one for this sentence, okay, and there's also be feidgenoch. So I always like to use it when I'm teaching, talk about those four: be savach, be mogal, be feicaloch, be feidgenoch. And you might have to be feidgenoch for this sentence to work. Be. So that spelling bi is used for orders, and we'll return to it in a second. Now, if you, like I said, you're going to be using it, be, from that comes ha and va, but also the future tense or the habitual tense, i.e. things that we do all the time, and this is bidh, be, okay, be, which is a little bit longer if you listen to it. It's not be, but be, okay. You will use that at the start of the sentence. That's the only place that you use bidh, be, okay, and in fact it's the only one you should use at the start of a sentence as well. Don't use bi, don't use bith, be at the start of the sentence. Be me a Janu video in Gaelic, I make Gaelic videos, okay. Be me a gubber Jakiadan, I work on Wednesdays. Be me a gubber. Be me a falav and marach, I will be going tomorrow. Be me a falav, bidh. So if you're watching this and you always put bith or bi just at the start of sentences, you're wrong. Bidh, be at the start of the sentence. And you think about it, it is a little bit longer in sound than just be mogal, be me mogal, I will be behaved. First time for anything. Q, bidh. Now, the next one that we talked about there was be. Now, we'll see bi in a few other situations, but the most common one is used with when we're talking about with being used with other words. For example, gumbi, hami smuhig gumbi me a gubber amarach. I think that I will be working tomorrow. Gumbi. So you'll see bi not just in orders, but you'll also see it in the middle of phrases quite long. If it's in the middle of sentences, it's quite often be, and that's the dependent form of the verb. It depends on another word to make it that form. Be, which we looked at earlier, is what we call an independent form, and that's where that comes in. So if you see bi, it should be part of another, connected to something. That's why it's called a dependent form. Now, another very dependent form is this one here, bhi, and you'll see that only, and I expressly say only, after cha. Chavi me tolija, I will not be happy. Chavi, bhi, the only place you should use bhi is after cha. Okay, absolutely nowhere else. And that's it. So remember, bidh only at the start of sentences, or you might have like a little urin in front of it or something. And the same applies with vi, chavi, okay? Now, the reason I'm being expressed about the point is there is another v, which is vi, okay? Vi, to be, vi. And again, if you listen to it, slightly longer in sound, not just chavi, but chavi, okay? V, okay? It's slightly longer in sound, that's why that TH is on the end. V, and this is a very commonly used verb because there's no Gaelic word for being in Gaelic. There's like, you know, be and being in English, okay? What we see, but the closest we have is V, which is what we call the infinitive form, to be. And you'll hear that in lots of sentences like ha mi a dul a bhí, ha mi dul a bhí a gobar amaro. I am going to be working tomorrow. Now that's quite a long and complicated one, but as you know, thinking these off the top of my head, I don't have a wee script, I should have thought this out. But you also see it with gu vi, ha mi gu vi jishal, I'm almost finished, which actually really just means I am to be finished, I am nearly finished, ha mi gu vi, that BHITH one. And you'll see that one quite commonly, that's a very common form on spelling. But as we've hopefully made clear in this video already, now it can appear in other places. Surinho vial, I can be there. But as we've said, BHI only after ha, BIDH only at the start of the sentences. BI and IV, they're the two that will always be most commonly used. Okay. Now there are a couple of other B spellings which seem to cause people confusion. One that might seem to be related to B, BITH, okay, is only used in very select circumstances. I see it getting used a lot by people completely erroneously, but BITH is only used in things like some B, any, like Avelugiri, Rudson B, do you want anything? Some B. You'll also see a dull a bee, okay, which is life, okay. If we're thinking about being, hi dull a bee, it's going out of life, it's going extinct, which hopefully the good spelling of Gaelic doesn't, and also Gaelic in itself doesn't go out. So a bee, but you would use BITH in very, very few circumstances, so please don't really use it. Err on side of caution, BIDH always. BIDH at the start, BHI at the after cha, and the rest of the time it's B or BHITH. I mean, V. You'll very rarely see BITH except in those select circumstances. There are a couple of other ones. In the future tense, we have this thing called the relative. That's really anything where you're using like kunye ha, kunye va. You also have kunye vias, okay? Kunye vias tu, or kunye vis tu. And that's spelled this way, vias, BHIOS, or sometimes you'll see it in a more emphatic form, kunye vias, BHITHEAS, okay? And that's used in with lots of little particles in question forms, kunye vias, kimere vias, nure vias, okay? So that's used only in the future tense, or the relative, not the relative, the habitual present tense, when you talk about things that you will be doing or things that you do all the time. And the final one is that there's two actual forms there. We're going to go right back to the start. BIDH, you will see a kind of more a formal, let's say, version of BIDH, B, okay, which is B, okay, B, and it seems to be a little bit more regular. And I like to make this point. We talk about irregular verbs in Gaelic, and we talk often that there's 10. Let's you know, say for example things like chai or chunig or rain. But the most irregular verb is be in itself. For example, its past tense is va, its present tense is ha, and its future tense is be. And that's an irregular verb down to its very definition, but we don't actually talk about it as an irregular verb very often, because we're so used to talking about the 10 regular verbs, but actually the most irregular verb is the most common, and that's why it is an irregular verb, because it can get away with it because it is commonly used. In fact, as we know, in the present tense it pretty much is 90% of be, and of course the other verb in the present tense that exists is, which is kind of a variant cousin of be, just meaning to be. So there is two versions. So you will get a kind of old emphatic version of BIDH, which is BITH, IDH, and it's pronounced be, bhitheas. So you can see why the spelling reflects the pronunciation in Gaelic. Okay, B. And we're going right back to the start. Now, as you know, if you've been doing Gaelic for a wee while, you'll know, for example, that when you give an order, there is a version for speaking to one person and a version for speaking to a plural person, or indeed somebody older than you. So for example, if I said to you, write down, I would say skriv, write, skriv. But if I want to speak to more than one, I'd say skrivev, skrivev, okay? So that if sound, which is related to shiv, comes up on the video. So bíomh mogul, bíomh savoch, bíomh feicaloch, bíomh feidgenoch. And that is only used in when you're being polite or you're being speaking to somebody plural, okay? So speaking to somebody plural, speaking to plural people. So that's it. So that's B. I'm in Doc's version Sullier. I hope that's clear. It's something which exercises a lot of people. It's something which I think really you need to do work on. Fluent speakers, by the way, are quite bad for not writing this down. Again, we're dealing with an adult literacy crisis in Gaelic, let's put it that way. This idea that, oh, I can't go leavig, no skrivig. We wouldn't accept that in English, so why do we accept it in Gaelic? Let's get people writing and reading. Let's look at ways to do that. So that's what we're looking at. So let's recap that, okay? The spellings of B, okay? BIDH, start of sentences. BHIV, only after ha, okay? B, we use that for orders, and we'll also use it in dependent forms like gumbi. It, as also, we move to V, BHITH, we use that in the infinitive, like Hamid Dolavi, I am going to be. Or we'll also say guvi, when we're talking about things that we're almost going to do, or that we are about to do. Guvi. We also remember that there is the BITH spelling. We only really use that in a few select phrases. For example, simbi, anything. And most of the time it's nothing to do with being. And then there is the relative forms, bhitheas and biths, which we use in a very select few structures in the future tense and the relative, not the relative, oh my gosh, what am I talking about? The habitual present, sorry, the things that you do all the time, bad habit there. And we did say that there are two kind of, there's an emphatic form, bihi and bíomh, for the orders as well. So, Hami and Dochas Gewilchen Sullier. And by the way, what's the Gaelic for an actual B is Shelan. Shelan. So, be feidgenoch, be patient, be feidgenoch, I guess be feigoch. Be careful. And I hope I'm in Doc's version Cordigdrive. And also on this video, Mila Time Guive Erson Mila Olquentin Air YouTube. Thanks very much for 1,000 follows on YouTube, and also Ganahula Dunya Avis Eket in the video on show in Instagram. Good joke. Thanks to everybody who follows the account here as well. Anyway, I give a harshin, I guess he should